Ready to step off the map from the most hidden alleyways to the stories nobody told you? Uncharted Alleyways begins now. Your definitive guide and travel podcast, culture, adventure, and the world as you've never heard it. Tune in, disconnect from the obvious, and come explore with us. Uncharted Alleyways, your next trip starts here.
If you stand in the very center of Rome today, you aren't just standing on the ground. You are actually standing on roughly 30 feet of compacted history.
Oh, at least 30 feet, yeah.
Right. Over the millennia, the city literally built itself on top of its own collapsed roofs, flooded riverbanks, and buried monuments. So the Rome we navigate today is quite literally floating on the graveyard of the empire.
It really is. I mean, it is the ultimate urban lasagna. You walk past a modern espresso bar, and the foundation of that building might be a theater where Julius Caesar once watched a play.
Which is just wild to think about.
Completely wild. There is no safe, comfortable pane of glass separating the past from the present there. That boundary just doesn't exist.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a journey into the heart of the Eternal City, pulling from this really fascinating collection of travel notes called Uncharted Alleyways.
A fantastic source, by the way.
It really is. And for you, the listener, our mission today is to completely bypass that generic tourist checklist. Whether you are, actively planning a trip to Italy or looking for a mental escape, or you simply want to learn how to read the urban landscape of a city that has survived for 3,000 years, we are going to give you the ultimate mental map of Rome.
Because surviving Rome as an observer, it requires understanding the psychology of the space just as much as the geography.
Okay, let's unpack this, because a city this dense, one that's floating on its own ruins, can induce an immediate sense of vertigo. So to understand the intimate, winding streets, we actually have to start by grappling with massive, overwhelming scale.
Right, which requires crossing a border into a place that technically isn't Rome at all, which is Vatican City.
It's such a geopolitical paradox. You have the smallest independent nation on Earth, right? It's a walled enclave hidden entirely within the boundaries of a single city, yet its soft power and influence stretch across the entire globe.
It's a massive footprint for such a tiny geographical space.
Exactly. I like to think of Vatican City as an inverted matryoshka doll, like a Russian nesting doll where the mechanism is completely flipped.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, geographically, it's the tiniest doll buried deep inside Rome, which is inside Italy. But culturally and historically, that innermost doll projects the largest shadow.
And that inverted structure, it is entirely by design, and it hits you the second you step into St. Peter's Square.
It really does.
The architecture isn't just big for the sake of being big. It is engineered to manipulate your physical and emotional response. John Lorenzo Bernini designed the square in the 17th century, and he used this massive trapezoidal layout leading into an ellipse.
Right, with those huge columns.
Yes, those massive colonnades. They're 4 rows deep of towering Tuscan Doric columns, and they create a very specific optical illusion.
They curve around the square like open arms.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the architectural psychology of that space. Bernini intentionally designed those arms to make the facade of the Basilica appear closer and more welcoming than it actually is.
Oh, wow. So it's literally pulling you in.
Yes. He engineered a space that forces visitors from countless different cultures to subconsciously slow their pace. You are standing in a crowd of thousands, devout pilgrims, vacationing families, artists sketching on the pavement, and yet the geometry of the square absorbs the chaos.
It really does. It's surprisingly quiet for how many people are there.
It imposes a unified sense of wonder and peace on what should logically be a highly stressful environment.
But then you walk inside St. Peter's Basilica, and the scale shifts from welcoming to just incomprehensible.
Unfathomable, really.
You have sunlight filtering down through these impossibly high windows, striking the marble floors. The intricate mosaics and carefully crafted sculptures, they just demand your attention in every single corner.
And then there's the dome.
Above it all is Michelangelo's dome. It's soaring so high, it almost feels like its own atmospheric weather system.
It actually forces your physical posture to change. Even people with absolutely no interest in religious history find themselves standing silently, just looking upward.
Yeah, and if you want to physically feel the weight of that architecture, you can climb the dome.
Which is an experience in itself.
Oh, for sure. You take hundreds of steps, and as you get closer to the cupola, the walls of the staircase literally curve inward, so it forces you to lean sideways as you climb.
It's tight. It's slightly claustrophobic, honestly.
Very claustrophobic. But when you step out at the very top, you are rewarded with this staggering panoramic view. You see the endless rooftops, the church domes, and the Tiber River winding through it all. It gives you the macro view before you descend into the micro view of the city.
But, and this is crucial, there is a severe psychological cost to all this scale.
Right.
St. Peter's is designed to induce awe. But human neurobiology can only sustain awe for so long before it degrades into exhaustion.
Which happens surprisingly fast.
Very fast. When you subject a brain to that basilica and then immediately march it next door into the Vatican museums, you run into a massive cognitive wall.
Yeah, the Vatican museums house centuries of sculptures, tapestries, paintings, and artifacts. I mean, it is a labyrinth of human genius.
It's overwhelming.
And the core advice from the source material is strict here. They say choose quality over quantity, pick a few galleries, study one room carefully, and bypass the rest. Oh, and book your tickets in advance.
Definitely book in advance. But yes, in cognitive psychology, there is a phenomenon called museum fatigue.
I have definitely felt that.
We all have. Your brain has a finite capacity for directed attention. When you enter a highly simulating environment, your visual cortex is firing rapidly, encoding details, colors, historical context.
Just taking it all in.
Exactly. But by the 20th room, your neural pathways are saturated. The brain starts categorizing priceless Renaissance masterpieces as mere background noise just to conserve energy.
That's so true. It all blurs together.
If you try to consume everything, your spatial memory fails, and you retain absolutely nothing.
So what does this all mean for the traveler who spent thousands of dollars to get there? We live in an era of intense FOMO, fear of missing out. You've flown across an ocean, you finally make it to the Vatican, and there's this nagging voice in your head screaming, I might never be back here, I have to see it all.
Right, the completionist mindset.
Yeah. Is it really okay to willfully ignore 90% of the Vatican Museum?
It is the only way the experience survives in your memory. Think about how Rome itself handles its own overwhelming history.
What do you mean?
Well, the city doesn't attempt to perfectly preserve everything in a frozen, static state. A perfect example of this is just a short walk down the Tiber River from the Vatican, which is Castel Sant'Angelo.
Oh, the evolution of that building is staggering.
It really is. It operates almost like open source software.
I love that analogy.
The foundational code of the building was laid down by the Emperor Hadrian as a mausoleum. Then, a few centuries later, the empire needs defense, so the popes rewrite the code and turn it into a heavily fortified castle.
Just completely repurposing it.
Right. Later, it gets patched again to become a lavish papal residence.
Yeah.
Today, it's a museum. Rome preserves its history by allowing successive generations to overwrite the function while keeping the structural integrity intact.
That makes a lot of sense.
The building survived because it adapted. As an observer, you have to adapt your itinerary the exact same way. You have to let go of the rigid completionist mindset.
And when you finally let go, the sensory experience of the city really opens up. The walk across the bridge to Castel Sant'Angelo, for instance, is intensely atmospheric.
It's beautiful, especially at dusk.
Yeah, you have street musicians playing, artists painting the skyline, and the river reflecting the evening colors. It is the perfect conceptual bridge, taking us from the heavily curated, exhausting environment of the museums into the raw, living ecosystem of Rome's streets.
And navigating that living ecosystem, that requires a completely different cognitive toolkit.
How so?
Curating a museum visit is about managing visual input, but navigating the streets of Rome is about reading the urban landscape.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Navigating Rome's streets is essentially like reading a hyperlinked Wikipedia article.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, you have the main text, right? The bold, famous landmarks like the Colosseum or the Trevi Fountain. Those are great, but if you only read the main text, you just get the summary.
Just the surface level.
Exactly. The real texture of the city reveals itself when you start clicking the obscure side links. You follow a side link away from the crowded piazzas, and suddenly you are in a neighborhood like Monti.
Monti is a brilliant example. In ancient Rome, this area was the Suburra, which was the crowded, chaotic red light district.
Oh, wow, the ancient slums, basically.
Yeah, but today, it is this incredibly atmospheric neighborhood where ivy climbs up ancient, weathered walls. You find independent bookshops, artisan boutiques, and a completely different acoustic environment.
It's so much quieter.
Or you cross over to Aventine Hill, where the noise of the traffic drops away entirely, replaced by peaceful gardens and the smell of orange trees, and you get these amazing scenic viewpoints.
But accessing those hidden side links requires some deeply practical urban literacy. The source notes make this very clear, starting with the actual ground beneath your feet.
You have to wear comfortable shoes. That is mandatory.
Non-negotiable, because you are constantly walking on San Pietrini, those small, square, volcanic cobblestones, and they aren't cemented together. They've pounded into the sand so the ground can breathe and shift.
Which is brilliant engineering for drainage, but
centuries of footsteps have polished them completely smooth. So if you aren't wearing the right shoes, those stones become a literal ice rink the moment it rains.
if we connect this to the bigger picture, those cobblestones aren't just a travel hazard, they are a tactile physical connection to the past.
That's true.
The friction of your shoe on that stone is the exact same physical interaction experienced by a medieval merchant or a Renaissance painter.
And that historical continuity extends to the city's infrastructure, too.
Like the public drinking fountains. Yes, the Nasoni, the big noses. Rome is dotted with these historic cast iron fountains continuously pouring out fresh, freezing cold water.
So definitely carry a reusable bottle.
For sure. But this isn't just a convenient place to fill a water bottle. You are interacting with the remnants of an ancient gravity-fed aqueduct system that still functions today.
That is just incredible to me.
And the design is ingenious. There is a hole at the bottom of the spout where the water pours out, and a small hole at the top. You plug the bottom hole with your thumb, and the water pressure shoots a perfect drinking arc out of the top.
It's functional history. But reading the urban landscape also means understanding the psychological boundaries of the city. You have to navigate the juxtaposition of the sacred, the chaotic, and frankly, the predatory.
A juxtaposition that becomes incredibly apparent in the crowded hubs.
Right. On one hand, you have strict social codes. You step out of a sweltering 90-degree street into a breathtaking church, and you suddenly have to cover your shoulders and knees out of respect for the sacred space.
It's a requirement.
But the moment you step back outside into the shadow of a major monument, you are in the hunting ground of pickpockets. The environment demands a constant, fluid awareness of your surroundings.
And that awareness also applies to the socioeconomic geography of the city, particularly when it comes to dining.
Oh, the culinary geography is ruthless.
It really is.
If you sit down at a restaurant where you can see the Pantheon from your table, you aren't paying for the quality of the pasta, you are paying rent on the view.
Exactly. The real culinary culture exists just 3 or 4 streets away from the gravitational pull of those major monuments.
That's where you find the family-run trattorias, serving incredibly fresh, authentic Roman dishes to locals who, frankly, wouldn't tolerate a subpar meal.
Right, because it requires an active effort to break away from the performative areas of the city. Rome is not a theme park built for your entertainment.
Right, no matter how much it feels like one sometimes.
It is a living, working metropolis that happens to be deeply entangled with antiquity. When you step off the main path, you aren't finding a secret exhibit. You are just joining the continuous daily life of the city.
Which brings us to perhaps the most profound insight in these travel notes. We've mapped out the physical geography, the architecture, and the psychology of the streets. But the ultimate key to understanding Rome isn't about space at all.
No, it's not.
It is about the geometry of time.
Because time behaves very differently in a place that calls itself the Eternal City.
The source reveals this quote-unquote local secret that completely shifts how you perceive the environment.
And it's so simple.
It is. The trick is to wake up long before sunrise. You walk out into the areas around Piazza Navona or the Pantheon while the city is still entirely asleep.
The sensory data in this window of time is completely distinct from the daytime experience.
It is incredibly cinematic. The streets are empty. The only sound is your own footsteps echoing off those San Pietrini cobblestones.
No crowds, no mopeds.
None of it. You might see a lone delivery bicycle quietly rolling through a narrow alley. You watch the very first rays of dawn light hitting stone that was carved 2,000 years ago.
Without the visual noise of the crowds, you really start noticing the micro details.
Yeah, like a heavily weathered wooden door or a tiny shrine to the Madonna tucked into a brick wall. And the smell completely shifts.
That's the best part.
The exhaust of the mopeds is replaced by the aroma of fresh bread drifting out of the local neighborhood bakeries.
It is a moment of total reset. You are witnessing the brief pause between the weight of yesterday's history and the start of today's commerce.
The notes actually contrast this feeling with other global historical sites, which I thought was super interesting.
Yeah, the comparisons are striking.
Like in Athens, you feel the specific roots of democracy, right? In places like Naxos or Simi, it's all about slowing down by the colorful harbors. Istanbul wraps you in this incredible cross-continental hospitality.
Places like Cappadocia or Petra showcase what human determination can carve out of raw, imposing nature.
But Rome defies that kind of neat categorization.
It really does.
Because its history refuses to stay confined to the ruins or the museums. It rings out in the church bells, it simmers in those family recipes passed down in the trattorias, and it waits in the quiet piazzas.
It's everywhere.
But sitting in that pre-dawn quiet, where the city feels almost timeless, it raises a philosophical question for me.
Okay, what is it?
Who does Rome actually belong to? Does it belong to the ancient emperors who poured the foundations? Does it belong to the modern baker pulling that fresh bread out of the oven? Or does it belong to the traveler who is standing there, quietly observing and processing it all?
This raises an important question about the burden of legacy. When a city holds this much collective human memory, ownership becomes a meaningless concept.
Meaningless how?
Well, synthesizing the underlying thesis of these travel notes, I would argue that Rome doesn't belong to anyone. Rather, Rome belongs to the passage of time itself.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The emperors, the popes, the bakers, the tourists, we are all just temporary custodians of the space. Rome doesn't belong to you. Rather, Rome asks for your participation.
It asks you to pause and notice things.
Exactly. To observe the layers and to appreciate your own fleeting place in its timeline.
It's not a possession to be conquered on an itinerary. It's a participation in a continuing story.
And that participation is exactly why the concept of FOMO is so misplaced here.
Because you can't miss what's constantly changing.
Right. Travelers return to Rome over and over again, not because they missed a specific monument or statue in a museum, but because a living city is constantly generating new history. It'll have a different story to tell you the next time you arrive.
That is a deeply comforting thought for anyone stressed about building the perfect travel schedule. You didn't miss out on Rome, you just left a chapter unread for the next visit.
Precisely.
So, to bring this all together for you, the listener, we've traced a massive psychological arc today. We started by grappling with the colossal, welcoming geometry of St. Peter's Square, understanding how soft power and scale manipulate our sense of awe.
We broke down the neuroscience of museum fatigue, learning why curating your focus is the only way to actually retain the brilliance of places like the Vatican.
We decoded the urban landscape, from the friction of the cobblestones to the engineering of the ancient fountains, learning how to find the authentic heartbeat of the city in quiet corners like Monti.
And we ended in those quiet, bread-scented alleyways at dawn, watching the eternal city reset itself for another day.
And historically speaking, this journey is far from over. The Uncharted Alleyways notes give us a very clear trajectory for our next deep dive.
Yes, they do.
Next time, we leave the ancient capital and head north into the heart of Tuscany. We are diving into Florence, exploring medieval bridges, explosive Renaissance art, and the dense, competitive urban environment that literally rewired human creativity.
It's a massive shift from the empire of antiquity to the empire of intellect and banking.
It is going to be fascinating. But before we get there, I want to leave you with the most practical life lesson you can pull from today's deep dive into Rome.
Oh, absolutely.
And this applies whether you are navigating the intricate alleys of Italy next month or you are just trying to survive a completely overwhelming week at your job.
We've all been there.
Do not overschedule your life to the point of cognitive fatigue. Leave blank space for unexpected discoveries. The most memorable parts of life, much like the hidden piazzas of Rome, are almost never the things you aggressively mapped out in advance.
That is the ultimate takeaway. And to push that thought one step further, we've talked about how Rome's history survives because it adapts, like Castel Sant'Angelo, and how the past lives on in everyday things like the friction of a cobblestone, evening piazza gatherings, or a family recipe. It forces you to look at your own daily routine differently. If the history of a civilization in Rome is ultimately defined by everyday life, how will the everyday life of our current era be preserved for a traveler walking those same polished cobblestones 1,000 years from now?
That's a huge question.
When our digital noise fades, what invisible tactile stories are we leaving behind in the alleyway?